My name is Leah, and I'm here to share with you a lesson plan template that is designed to maximize student engagement with the material and social interaction with each other and with you, the teacher, during the math class period. Today's video is just going to explain the layout of the template and why it's designed the way it is. In future videos, I will present specific lesson plans on specific math topics that use the template for your own professional development, your own interest, or to share with your team. Okay, so let's get started. So first we're going to start with the vertical column. As you can see here, the vertical column is divided into time intervals. We have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, and 5 minutes. This is designed after what's normally referred to as a HIIT class in a physical fitness workout at a gym. HIIT standing for high intensity interval training. How I arrived at this particular format was in my long quest to give a satisfactory answer that any fair-minded student would accept to the question, when are we ever going to use this? I always had an answer, and I tried many types of answers, but the one that I finally found was accepted by students is when they would ask, when are we ever going to use this? I would say, okay, why go work out if you're never going to be a professional athlete? And of course they would say, well, to be healthy. And I would say, good, okay. So what's the benefit of being physically healthy? And they would say things like, well, to feel good and to be able to do the things we want to do. I said, excellent. Math is your mental workout. Even if you don't have a desire to be a professional mathematician, the ability to think well is just as important and gives the same outcomes as being physically fit. You want to be mentally fit. And this is something that they would accept. And so this is where this interval training idea came to me in designing the lessons. We're going to start out 5 minutes with a warm-up, a problem that really all students would be able to accomplish within 5 minutes. At least if they get the answer wrong, they're still very familiar with the problem. The last thing I want for a student to start math class is, I don't even know what's going on. They enter and, well, here we are again. I have no idea what's happening. No, they're gonna start off with a very real opportunity to be successful and just make that transition. They're out of English class now, they're in math, they're getting on task, not stressing them out, giving them something they can do, and then we're into the class. Okay, so the second 10 minutes is group work, and what it is homework review. I always assign homework problems that have either the answer in the back of the book or they're online problems that have explanations once the students submit their answers. I train the students how to come prepared the next day to discuss the problems that they really didn't understand. Even if they were given an explanation for online, it didn't make any sense to them. So I let them work in groups for about 10 minutes. All I do is I circle the room, I listen to the conversations, I check in with people. I don't give any answer to how to do the problem. I might give a clue. A lot of times I have to redirect, that's okay. And the students learn how to help each other. Now, because I have circled through the class, I'm aware of what is the most challenging problem that they tried to do last night that many are not still understanding, even with the help of each other. And so at that point, at the end of this time, I will either work that problem on the board or I will call a student to the board to explain it to the class. Okay, so that's the next 10 minutes. There's more involved. They're having to start thinking, but they've got the support of the group around them. It's not intimidating because it's in small groups. Nobody feels put on the spot. So, you know, again, we're increasing the level of intensity, but not so much so that people want to give up at this point. Okay, the next 15 minutes is typically direct instruction. And I may not use the whole 15 minutes for direct instruction if this is like the third day on a topic. But with the direct instruction, there are a lot of elements that I include in direct instruction other than just me talking and working the problem on the board. And I'll go into a little more detail about that in a moment. And then we hit the crescendo of the intensity of the classroom, and that's always the activity. I really do like to have an activity almost every day, just because I do feel like giving students the opportunity to explore a problem, to struggle with a problem together and discuss it, is the most effective way to move understanding forward. And how I go about that activity, again, I'll explain in a moment. And then we have the wind down. What I always used was questions for candy. Now, in my school, with my parents and my administrators, no one had an issue with that. You may have to use a different incentive, your questions for fill in the blank. But this was always just a fun time to wind down the class. Of course, I would ask serious math questions to go along with these questions for candy. But sometimes I'd throw in, you know, a funny question because of something someone said during the class or something fun that was going on at school that day. But it's just a nice way to just wind down the class, typically have a good laugh together before math class takes off. So, you know, the bookends of math class are you're entering in to working on a problem you're familiar with, you understand pretty well what's being asked of you, and then ending with, you know, just a class laugh, and no stress to begin and end. So that's how that's designed. Now, the horizontal row addresses all 4 learning styles. So we have mastery, interpersonal, creative, also known as self-expressive, and understanding. Now, in the student population, mastery learning style is preferred by 40% of the students. Interpersonal learning style is preferred by about 40% of the students. And then creative and understanding each are the remaining 10% each of that learning style. But I like to have in the lesson plan template all 4 learning styles staring at me every day when I'm planning a lesson so that I am reaching 100% of my kids. And it forces me to think, did I include anything that was creative, a creative ask of the students today? So, for example, let me go back over what I just said about the warm-up. The warm-up, complete mastery. That's it. That's all it is. Because it's independent and you're just trying to hone a skill. Okay. The homework review, however, hits mastery, it hits interpersonal, and it hits understanding. All 3 of those, in the way I described how I've set up the homework groups, all 3 of those styles are addressed. Okay. In the direct instruction portion of the lesson, I really do try to at least hit mastery, interpersonal understanding through the way I lead the instruction, through the questions that I ask of the students. And sometimes incorporating creativity is as simple as asking something like, all right, there's a phrase that says numbers never lie. What does that mean? And just, you know, having students think about numbers never lying as an analogy or metaphor is throwing in a creative element to the discussion. And so again, because when I'm planning the lesson, I've got all 4 of these styles staring at me. Am I addressing this? How am I addressing it? I'm more intentional about making sure I incorporate it. Okay, and then we move into the activity. And to me, the activity is the crescendo. It is the most intense, it is the biggest ask of my students because they're having to think through either a much harder problem together or I'm asking them to explore a concept prior to me instructing about it. I want them to discover for themselves some foundational concepts to the topic before I even say a word about it. So this is the most intense part of the class, but we've eased our way there. And so most of the time, they really are there and ready to tackle it. And so again, the activity could be all four. It could just be mastery, interpersonal understanding, but I do as much as possible, at least once a week, try to make sure there's a creative element to the classroom activity for that day. And then, like I said, when we end with questions for Candy, that is both mastery and interpersonal because the mastery, I do ask serious math questions of what we studied that day. But again, like I said, we're also talking about whatever socially might have happened in the class that day. And it's, like I said, we typically end with a laugh, which is a great way to end math class. So this is my lesson plan template for maximizing student engagement and social interaction in the classroom. I have found that it is the most productive way to look at your whole class and to have all students progress in their math understanding by using this type of framework. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you like it, please like it down below. Please feel free to share it with your group, your math department, as part of your professional development. Like I said, I will be doing more videos with specific math topics using this template. But for today, I've explained the framework. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.